Hey, this is Daniel from Devil & Sons Guitars. I'm just going to show you how to set up a bridge like this headless bridge on the guitar I've made from Marco from Reptil. I'm going to go through how to adjust the heights, how to adjust the intonation, how to string it up, but also how it works, but based on the idea that you already know how to set up a guitar. At this end, the ball end of the string slots into each of the 6 grips, and then you just turn it clockwise to tighten it, and you can see it pulls the ball in, so now the ball of the string is not going to come out whatever happens. So once you've got the string taut, because you're going to tighten it at the other end in a moment, adjusting this, the microtuner basically pulls the string tighter or loosens the string. So that's how we change the pitch of the string. Ideally you don't want to turn it too far because you don't want it to have any situation where this ball can pop out. So if you turn it too far, it pops out. That's how you change the string. Now there's one quick thing to show you, that sometimes you could turn it too far and this whole piece can come all the way out, and then what happens is, look, it's come loose. Now if you're lucky, you'll be able to just push it with your finger, push the microtuner back in, tighten it, and the 2 pieces will grip as this one seems to have done, and then they'll be linked back together. But if for some reason you miss that, if you can't tie up, which does happen, then what you need to do is take the whole bridge off. And I'm going to show you how that works. So what we've got here, now I've taken the strings off, is the floating part of the bridge at the top has these 2 blades, one on each side. You can just see it there, we'll have a close look in a moment. And that pushes up against a strut which comes out of the part of the bridge, the fixed bit that's screwed into the guitar itself. Now, what I'm going to do is push that blade backwards so it comes unhooked on both sides from the strut, and then pull the bridge up and pull it forwards out of place. So I'll see if I can do it without blocking the camera too much. There we go. Pulled it up, you can see the blade just there, and now we can bring it up and out. Now the floating part of the bridge is out, I can turn it over and you can see the 2 blades at the front here, which are what we anchor against when the bridge tremolos. But I'm going to quickly just show you the inside where we were just looking at the part with the strings hook on. There's 5 screws here that hold it in place, these 5. So I'm just going to quickly unscrew those so we can see the inside. So here now we have the inside, and you can see that each of the 6 parts that grips the strings is just an individual block with a part that connects to the microtuner, basically like a bolt with a spring in place. So let's take one of those out, just have a look. It's like this, and then we can simply unscrew it. And this is what happened before when I showed you. We turned it too far, it came loose, and then it was a matter of trying to get it to match up on the inside. The way it fits back together, you can't just drop this in. This spring is going to hook on the inside of here. There's a little lip which stops the spring from shooting out the top. And then under here, under each of these, there's a little washer that holds in place. If I just pull the spring down a bit, push it up to sort of sandwich the outside of the top part of the bridge. That holds it together. Here where we've got the screw thread, just push it against here and tighten it up. Oh, my spring's come loose, there we go. And we can just push it in and it's held then in place. So while the top part of the bridge is out, it gives me a chance to show you the saddles. See, all the 6 saddles are the same, and they're held in place by tension because it's a tight fit between the 6 of them. Pull one out and they all fall apart. But basically, the way they work is each one of them has got 2 little grub screws in opposite corners, which you can use once it's in place to adjust the angle of it. The front grub screw, push it up, back rat screw, push it up at the back, up at the front, up at the back. You can raise both the front and back, you can raise just the front, just the back. Allows you to change the angle or the height. So that's how we will partly adjust the string height, and once they're all pushed together, there is a chance they're going to slip. So what we have just at the side here, once they're all in the position that we want, so we use sliding them backwards and forwards as a way of adjusting the intonation. Just at the side here, there's a little Allen screw, grub screw, which we can tighten, and once we tighten that, pushes these, pressures them all together and stops them slipping, so there's no slipping of the intonation once we're playing. Just here, I've got like a little disc that sticks out. If I angle it, you can see it a bit better. It's a bit like a kind of flat mushroom that sticks out. Well, that part, once the bridge is in place, is where we push up at the back the little clip that clips into here. And once it's clipped into here, what it does is it stops the bridge from floating anymore. So it grips it in place. And that's what we need to do when we are both locking off the tremolo and also tuning up the guitar. It's really important that it clips into there. Whilst the floating part of the bridge is off, we can see the fixed part on the inside, and this is the bit I just mentioned that flips up and down, that basically allows you, there's a little slot here that clips into the part that was underneath the bridge to lock it in place. We'll see that later on when we're actually tuning up, but that will slot up and down here. You can also see here the uprights that the blades of the floating bridge fits into, and actually you can see the whole metal part of this fixed part of the bridge that have been screwed in place. So it's routed down, and it's got this whole part that's routed out in the middle, which is where the spring's going to go. So the whole purpose of the spring is to fit between the floating part of the bridge and the fixed part of the bridge, and to allow tension to happen. And you can adjust the tension, and that means the tighter the tension, the stiffer the tremolo is going to be. There's this part that fits in the end of the spring. Basically, it's like a cap with a little hole in it. The hole doesn't go all the way through it though, it's just like an indent. The purpose of that is pushing up against here is going to be the fixed part of the bridge. You'll see it in a minute, it'll be much clearer in a moment. And then coming through the fixed part of the bridge is our tension adjusting rod, which is basically a bolt, and it's going to tighten through the nut that's on the fixed part of the bridge. It's going to tighten and push into that little indent in the cap here. It won't go through it because it's blocked at the end. So what it will do as we tighten it is it will push inwards, so it will compress the spring. I can't do it with my hands, but it will compress the spring, and by compressing the spring, increase the tension. So let's see that in the actual guitar. So the floating bridge slots into here, but it's going to have the spring underneath it. The spring will slot into this gap which is routed out. Here's that cap again, the cap in the end of the spring. The cap's going to push against the fixed part of the bridge which is screwed in, which has a hole in the end. In the hole in the end the bolt goes through it, the tension bolt, but it doesn't just slide through, it's like a nut, so you need to tighten it. And what you'll see as I tighten it now is it's coming through into the space where the spring is. But instead of just going through the gap of the spring, because the cap's there, it's pushing against the cap. So essentially it's going to be compressing the spring. So you can see it compressing the spring there. Well, here it's just compressing the spring into the fixed part of the bridge. So no point in that. But what will happen is the floating part of the bridge that goes on here has the part that sticks down on it, this part, with the hole which is the recess that the spring's going to go into. So as I tighten this, it's now going to be pressing against the floating part of the bridge. Remember the two blades at the front are linking onto these two parts here, 1, 2. So it's basically applying more pressure to push that tighter against those uprights. The spring pushing into the part of the floating bridge with the cap at the end of it coming into here. So the way we do it is we angle it down so the cap's touching the back of this part, the fixed part, and then push the bridge backwards so that the blades at the front can hook under the uprights, and then we can lift this slightly, and just on this side we've got that lock, remember? And that lock will hold it in place to allow for the tension bolt to screw in. Now with the tension bolt you can do it by hand, or you can just put a screwdriver in and do it with a screwdriver. Actually, with a lot of elements in this, you can do it by hand, or you can use some tool. So for example, we've got the micro tuners you can do by hand, or you can just put in the correct Allen key, do it by Allen key, which is actually what I tend to do when I'm tuning up, use the Allen key. It's much easier. And actually on stage, some people keep their Allen keys either attached to the guitar or nearby, so that they can do that as well. It's quite hard to show you on the camera, but this is the little latch that I was talking about at the back, which we can use to lock the bridge in place. So at the moment it's quite tight, the tension, so the bridge is pulling down. You can see that's the angle if we had the tremolo bar and we could move it. Well, now if I just pull it up and I can put the latch in place, that latch clips, you heard it click, and it's basically attached to that little protrusion that we saw on the underneath of the front bridge, and that's locked it in place. So I'm about to put the strings in. I've moved the little grips forward just far enough that the balls of each string is going to fit perfectly into it. And then, I mean, you could do this one at a time, but I'm going to try and, just to make it better for the video, put them all in. So basically, putting the string in, ball in, pushing it down a bit, then I'm pulling it back just far enough that it's not going to pop out. I'll tighten it properly later on. So I can do that with the next couple of strings as well. There you go. See, it will pop out, and then we'll pull it back just far enough that it's not going to pop out. Basically, you want it as far forward as possible to start with, and that gives you the most leeway when you're tightening the string. Gives you the most distance that you can possibly tighten it, which is better. And just to double check that they're all in, there you go, so they're all gripped in. So as a headless guitar, we've got the neck, the space where the normal locking nut goes, the normal locking tuners, but it's also got these grub screws in the end. So what happens is our string passes through the guitar, through the neck, comes down under here. I'll film that from another angle in a minute. We can push the string right through. There we are. And what I'm going to do is pull it as tight as I can, give me as much option as I can when I do it later, when I tune it later. Do it as tight as I can here, and then with the Allen key I can just turn it in, and what it does is it pushes into the string, into the guitar neck, and it's just going to lock that in place. So let's make sure that's tight. And that allows me then to put the locking nut on that we're used to seeing. So that just goes through here. Now obviously these strings are a bit thicker, so it's going to be a bit harder than on the top strings to lock it in place. Basically these grubs at the end replace the equivalent of when we have on a machine head, a tuning peg, where the string goes in and it's tightened round and gives it the extra strength to stop it slipping. They're there instead of that. Then I've got my clippers to clip the strings. Now this one aesthetically, I'm deliberately leaving it longer than maybe they should be, because I want this one to look a bit of a mess. This is a steampunk, end of the road, destroyed guitar. The person that was commissioned it said he wanted it to look as effed up as possible. I put the first 5 strings on. This is the top E, which hopefully you'll see will go straight through the top of the neck here, where I can pull it through the other side. It's a bit awkward at this angle, but I'm going to pull it as tight as I can again. Put it as tight as I can, hold it in place, tighten up my grub screw, which as you can see is going into the body and therefore holding the string tight in place. And then I'll be able to flip it over and just on the top add the last of the holders from the locking nut. Okay, so I've just used the Allen key on all of the strings to adjust the tension, pull the strings in basically, adjust the tension so now they're roughly in tune. I've also checked the truss rod. So the way we change the height here is these bridge saddles. Now the saddles, they've got quite a lot of give actually, because you can, at the front of them, each one's got an Allen key, and at the back each one's got an Allen key, so you can adjust the height and you can adjust the angle. Obviously you want it so that you don't want the back too high, because this middle bit here is where the string's touching. If the back's too high, it's going to catch on the back, it's not going to be resting on these saddle parts, especially when you're using the tremolo. So you want to try and get it really so that wherever possible the back and the front are roughly the same, or the front's a little bit higher. One reminder, just before you adjust these, there's the Allen key here. That is the key that when we turn it, the grub screw is going to go inwards and push these together to hold them in place to stop them slipping backwards and forwards, which is the next stage, the intonation. So loosen that a bit, adjust your height so you've got them how you want. It's always best with a guitar set up when you're adjusting the height to have your guitar in your sitting position when you're doing it. Remember, all the time doing this I've got the bit at the back, the clip locked up, because I want this to not be floating while we're tuning it. Don't want it floating while you're tuning it. Locked in place, I'm going to sit it up, play it in the playing position, adjust the height so I've got them all right, and then we're going to move on to the intonation. If your octaves are flat, you need to shorten your string, which means moving your bridge that way. But hopefully we'll be moving our bridge that way most of the time, because we're quite near the front anyway. Moving it that way, lengthening it because our octave is a bit sharp maybe. Anyway, let's see what happens. I'm going to set that up, set them all up. Remember this grub screw that's in here, I've loosened it so it's come out to allow these to move. Once I've pushed them in the right place, I'm then going to tighten that screw again, the grub screw again. That will hold these all nice and tightly together so they don't give at all. And all the time we've got the lock at the back in place to stop the bridge floating in any way. So intonation is moving these backwards and forwards after we've done the height of the strings. So here we go, so that's an E. When I do my octave higher, it's sharp. So to move it back, I'm gonna just loosen the string a bit. So there's no tension on the saddle, and then the saddle will slide backwards. Might be a bit hard to see from that angle, but I've just moved it back. Now it's back. Tie this back up to an E. And as I mentioned before, it's normally best when you're setting up to do it all in a sitting position. So I've got an E there. You can hear that's much closer than it was before. Still not quite right, so I'm going to move it back even more. Loosen the string a bit. I'm trying to do it so you can see it. Just shifting it back very slightly. Tighten it again. So my tuner hits me there at an E. Anyway, keep going so I've got it all perfectly right. So once you've got it in tune, you want to set the tension of the spring for the tremolo. So this is how you adjust the tension. As we tighten that, remember, it tightens the spring, giving more tension. When we take the latch off, if the spring is too tight, then it's going to be pulling the strings back, the bridge back at this angle, raising it up at the front, down at the back, and what's going to happen is the strings are going to go sharp. If you have it too loose, it's going to raise up at the back because the string tension is going to be higher and your strings will go flat. You may want it like that for some reason, that when you take the latch off it goes out of tune and then you can control it with the tremolo, but ideally we want it so when we take this off it's going to stay in tune. So I'll play a note. If it's an E, then when I drop the latch here, I drop the latch and now play it. Oh, it's more or less in tune. But what you can do is turn this so that if it was too tight, we can turn here. Right, let's loosen it a bit. And you can hear. Hear the note getting lower as I'm loosening it, and the bridge is raising slightly. So there it's gone down to a C sharp from an E. So let me tighten it back up. We are back at the E, so it should be the same as when I latch it back up. Ideally, you don't want to adjust any of the tuning without the latch on, because once the bridge is floating, if you change one string slightly, the tension in that one string is going to change the tension in all the other ones because the bridge is going to move because of that tension. So changing one string will change the pitch of all the others. So it's almost impossible to get it in tune again. So you want to keep the latch on to tune it up. Make sure when you take the latch off, this is tight enough so that we get exactly the right pitch all the time. So once you've got all that set up, you can put the tremolo bar in. There's a hole here at the bottom, there's a hole at the top as well, so you can set this bridge up left-handed. It's not going to go in all the way until you loosen the grub screw that's just behind the tremolo bar here. You loosen it. When you loosen it, what it does is it lets a little ball bearing that's underneath it slide back and be free, so you can push your tremolo bar all the way in. That means if you leave it loose, like I have at the moment, you can probably even loosen it more, the ball bearing allows the tremolo bar to be really free. So if you want it really loose, depending on your style of playing, or you could then tighten the grub screw, and then it will push the ball bearing against the tremolo bar, making it much stiffer. So as you can see, it doesn't hang free, it doesn't swing loose. So depending on your style of playing, you'll have that tightened or loosened.